I was at a conference, and I had just given a talk on the power of your voice. And afterwards, I was speaking to some of the people from the audience when I noticed at the back of the group there was a woman. She didn't really engage in the conversation with us, she just stood there quietly. And after the others were gone, she came up to me and she thanked me for my talk, and she said, I liked it, but it's not for me. And I asked, what do you mean? And she said, I've always had problems with my voice. If I speak for any length of time, then I get hoarse. And even as a child, when I sang in the school choir, the teacher told me not to sing, just to mouth the words because my voice was so ugly. But there's nothing I can do about it, and it doesn't really matter anyway, does it? I started to ask her some more questions when I was briefly interrupted. And when I turned back, she was gone. I looked for her over the course of the conference to see if I could find her and continue our conversation, but I never found her. I never got to tell her that teacher who told her that her voice was ugly was wrong. I never got to tell her that there is so much that she could do with her voice if only she knew how. I never got to share with her that the voice of a newborn baby, on average, in the right conditions, is so strong that it can be heard over a mile away. And every one of us is born with this magnificent instrument. And I never got to tell her that, yes, it does matter how your voice sounds. So, if you're thinking, it doesn't really matter how your voice sounds, let's do a little experiment. Imagine the door opens, and in walks the most magnificent, stunning, sexy woman you have ever seen. She's tall. She's got a perfect figure, a perfect posture. She's dressed to the nines, a beautiful face. She then takes the stage, opens her mouth, and says,
"Good morning. How are you today?"
What does that do to your image of her? And just hypothetically speaking, with whom would you rather go on a date? With him
Good morning. How are you?
or with him?
Good morning. How are you?
Your voice matters. And how your voice sounds impacts what others think of you and how they feel about you. In 2002 at Harvard University, Professor Nalini Ambady did a study on why some surgeons are sued for malpractice, although found of no wrongdoing. They're sued for malpractice multiple times. And other surgeons are never sued at all. So she had two groups of doctors, those who'd been sued multiple times, those who had never been sued at all. And she looked at different parameters. She looked at, for example, perhaps the doctors who'd never been sued before, perhaps they are actually more qualified than the other doctors. Or perhaps they spend more time with the patients. Or perhaps there's a difference in the content of what they say to their patients. In all of these three, there were no substantial differences between the two groups of doctors. Then, because she had recorded the patient's examinations to do these analyses, she then just looked at the quality, the timbre, the color of the voice itself. And what she found with that particular comparison is that's where the greatest difference was. The doctors who had never been sued before had a warmth in their voice that invoked trust in their patients. And the doctors who had been sued multiple times had an edginess, a sharpness in their voice that either could be interpreted as dominance or as insecurity. So how your voice sounds matters. And even in the examples that I just did a minute ago with the two male voices and the female voice, both male voices were from one actor, and the female voice was my own. So you can take a voice that is somewhat attractive and add tension to it and make it unattractive. And you can take a voice that is unattractive and release those tensions and create something beautiful. Another interesting study about the voice was done in 2017 at Yale University by Professor Michael Krauss. And this was a study on empathy. Professor Krauss wanted to know of the nonverbal communications of body language and voice, from which of these do we get the most cues as to what others are feeling? And so in his study, he had three situations. The first situation is the participants of the study would watch the person speaking. They only saw the body language. There was no audio. In the second situation, they saw the body language, so video, and audio. In the third situation, it was just audio. So they would hear the voices of the people speaking, but they didn't see them. In these three situations, Professor Krauss found that the participants could most accurately tell what the people were feeling, those who were speaking, in the third situation. So our voice is the key instrument to empathy, to being able to tell exactly how others are feeling. So you ask yourself, okay, that's all well and good, Laura, but what can I do myself with my voice starting today? And of course, for this, I brought an acronym. You've got to have an acronym. And the acronym is easy. It is the word voice. Easy to notice and remember anyway. The V stands for vary, how you vary your voice. At the University of Southern Denmark, Professor Oliver Niebuhr has been studying charisma since around 2015. He's analyzed different speeches from charismatic speakers like Steve Jobs or Oprah Winfrey, etc. And he looked at the nonverbal communication to see exactly what are the factors that cause these speeches and these speakers to be charismatic. And he found, again, it was surprisingly, or not surprisingly, the voice. And it's actually not surprising, because if you think of some of the greatest speakers of our time, or of the 20th century, probably the greatest speech is Dr. King's I Have a Dream. I can't tell you what gestures he made as he was giving that speech, but I think we all hear his voice as he says, I have a dream. Or President Kennedy's Ask Not What Your Country Can Do For You speech. What we hear is his voice. So the voice is a key instrument to giving charismatic presentations or being much more interesting when you're speaking, to the family at Thanksgiving dinner, for example. Yeah. And what in particular is important is that we vary our voice. In particular, these are 6 different aspects of the voice with which you can play. You can speak a little bit softer, and then louder. And that, again, will capture the attention of your audience. Or speed up the tempo at which you're speaking, and then slow down. Or you can play with the color of your voice, bringing more warmth into your voice when you tell a story, or coming to the point when you need to. Or you can play with your pauses, because that captivates your audience. The O in voice stands for opening up. I have been working with singers and speakers on their voice for over 30 years now. And the main thing that we work on is opening up. And in particular, opening up the throat, which adds depth and warmth and volume, fullness to the voice, and opening up the body, which allows them to breathe deeply. Now, your breath is really important for your voice for a variety of reasons, but one of the most interesting, and the one that I find that we don't speak very often about, is the way that you breathe. Because of the mirror neurons, the way that you breathe is going to impact everyone listening to you. So, Just observe what happens in your body when I breathe superficially. Hi, I'm Laura Baxter, and it's wonderful to be here in Cape May. And it's so wonderful to have you here to listen to all these wonderful talks and feel. How do you feel right now? And listen to the color of my voice. What's happened? And I can tell you, with this voice, there's not a lot I can do with it. It just sounds the way it sounds. Yes. How are you doing? And then compare that, please, to. Hi, I'm Laura Baxter, and it's wonderful to be here in Cape May. How do you feel now? Thank you. I'm glad. I'm glad. So your voice and how you breathe affects everyone around you. And what I did when I breathed superficially is I brought you into stress. When we are in stress, when we have anxiety or fear, we tighten up the upper abdominals, we breathe superficially. And what I did is I caused that feeling in you. And it's almost impossible to listen in that situation. And then when I released, you could then breathe deeply as well. So open up so that you can also help others to open up, both in their bodies and also in their minds and their hearts. The I in voice stands for intention. Your voice will always reflect your intention. Whether your intention is conscious, if you're aware of it or not. So ask yourself in every situation, what is my intention? Is your intention to prove that you're right no matter what? Or is your intention to build bridges and open up new relationships? Are you thinking about the thousands of things you've got to get done before the end of the day? Or are you in the here and now, in the moment, being able to really experience what's going on right now? What is your intention? Be aware of this, and your voice will automatically follow. The C in voice stands for courage. There are so many people in this world who have so many fantastic ideas. And they really just don't have the courage to speak up and share those ideas. So my hope is for you, when you have ideas that you want to share, and you think, oh, maybe they won't like these ideas, or I don't know, have the courage to speak up and let your voice be heard. And last but not least is empathy. In this rather polarized world in which we live, we need more empathy and compassion. And the more you work on your voice, the better you will be able to control your voice so that you're truly communicating the feelings you want to be communicating. In addition, the more you work on the voice, the better you will be able to stay in your center, being centered, calm, strong. And in doing so, you will help those around you stay centered, calm, and strong. And last but not least, when you work on your voice, you also improve your listening skills so that you can hear the nuances in other people's voices and better be able to build bridges to them and create meaningful relationships. At the beginning, I mentioned a lady at the conference. I never got to share these things with her. I never got to see what was possible with her voice. But I promise you that discovering the power of your voice is one of the most rewarding, enlightening, and empowering journeys of self-discovery that you will ever go on. In this world of polarization, it is hard to be heard. We often come to the realization that it's hard to keep your word. It is so hard to be kind, to be strong, Look above. Let your voice be a voice of hope and love. What would you do if you knew that your voice could move mountains? What would you do if you knew that your voice could dry tears? What would you do if you knew that your voice was the fountain of love and joy to heal and melt others' fears? What would you do? Your voice has power, and embracing that power will help you move mountains. Your voice can heal. Your voice can build trust. Your voice can move others and inspire them to action. Let your voice be a voice of hope and love. What would you do if you knew that your voice could move mountains? What would you do if you knew that your voice could dry tears? What would you do if you knew that your voice was the fountain of love and joy to heal and melt others' fears? What would you do? What would you do if you knew that your voice could move mountains? What would you do if you knew that your voice could dry tears? What would you do if you knew that your voice was the fountain of love and joy to heal and melt others' fears? What would you do? What would you do?